Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Before we get started here, let's unpack some of the merch stuff. So the store is finally open. If you haven't already checked out, it's down there in the description, the link to it. If you're looking for one of these hoodies that I'm wearing in every video, or one of the hats that me and the guys are wearing, nice warm sweaters. Yours will not have a bunch of husky hair on it. Unless you have a husky. Oh my goodness. We also have toques, or beanies, depending on where you're from. We have decals or decals, depending on where you're from. So you can check that out in the description. If that doesn't work for you, you can donate as little as $1 at Patreon. Join Kip, Matt, Christopher, and more to help keep the content rolling. All right, let's get into things. Okay, today we are going to talk about the white M8. The white M8. I actually had planned on doing this video, the one I'm doing right now, at the very end of the series, but I had a ton of people asking me over Instagram, over just comments on YouTube, DMs, how I'm liking what I did, and then I also had people raising concerns, and there's definitely pros and cons to what I did. So let's do an overview of that sled. So I'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of what we did to that sled, because there's certainly a trade-off in what we're getting for that kind of semi-custom kit that we installed. There's a couple of people who said, Matt, I've got the parts. I'm going to install this kit tomorrow, and I'm going to follow exactly what you say. No, hold on a sec. There's more you need to know. So let's go over a couple things that are actually consequences of doing this kit the way that I did it, which was never meant to be installed the way it was. The first thing is bump steer. So there is going to be a little bit of bump steer with this sled, with the modification I've done to it, with that longer shock installed, with the customization I had to do to the tie rods to get it to fit, the tie rod ends particularly. Bump steer, if you don't know what bump steer is, put simply, it's the sled, or it happens in cars, it happens on snowmobiles, it happens on quads, it happens on pretty much anything, and there's no way to fully get rid of it, but there are ways to minimize it. Basically what bump steer is it's the tendency of a wheel, or in this case a ski, to steer itself during the suspension travel. Now on the trails, this is definitely more concerning, and it's a little more aggressive than stock on this sled as well. It's not necessarily something you want in a mountain sled. It's not as big a deal. I have a lot of experience with mountain sleds, so I already kind of can predict what they're going to do. And that's not me flexing. That's just me having a lot of hours on a sled before. I just took it on about, I would say, 150 kilometers worth of trail over the last weekend. I didn't really feel a problem with the bump steer with it, but it's something you definitely got to be aware of, especially if you are having those softer suspension values. I actually have to take a little bit of air out of the shock on that machine, out of both front shocks that is, because after we did that modification, it is riding like a rock. So I usually run my shock pressures really high, and I did not change them since we did that install. So I'm actually going to be taking a little bit of air out of them just to make that suspension a little more plush, because it is freaking hard right now, and it's actually not even helping with the ski pressure, and we'll get to ski pressures in a minute. But what that stiff shock pressure does is it actually helps combat bump steer, because the shock is not going through its whole travel. But it's definitely something, if you're doing this modification, it's definitely something that you need to be aware of. I haven't found it to be a huge deal yet. It's not really all that aggressive, but I also have the shocks not overpressured, but they've got some pressure in them. The tie rods on this modification. So as you know, I actually had a spare tie rod that was short, and then I had the stock one that was long, and I was able to actually cheat those, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I had people say, you know what you should do is just put spacers so that tie rod will clear that A-arm. Well, I did that. I actually, I just didn't show it. But yes, there are spacers under each tie rod end link to help lift it up just a little bit on the spindle and get a little more clearance. I just didn't show it. Another thing that we had here, just a little bit in a couple spots, really minor, is I'm having the upper A-arms contact the plastic just a little bit. Like you can tell that they're just barely rubbing across it, and that's at full extension. So if I take a little bit of air out of those shocks, that's also going to help with that issue. I mean, honestly, when I went to install that kit, the way that I installed it, if those shocks were, say, a 1/16 of an inch taller, they would not have fit in that sled. The next thing that was brought up was ski pressure, and this is something that I was aware of even before doing the modifications to that front end and installing it the way that it was installed. So we dropped the skid a little bit. I think I'm gonna drop it a little bit more in the front to help level it out just a tiny bit more, and that's gonna help with the ski pressure. There is certainly more ski pressure, but even though there is more pressure on the skis, I'm still finding it really, I guess, playful. It's still really easy to pop up that front end because we're sitting so much higher. The attack angle on the track is a little more aggressive. I'll get to that in a minute because there's a few other things I got to cover with that. But definitely there is some ski pressure. I haven't got a really good feeling for it just yet. And it's because the snow that we were riding in, it changed so fast. Like everything in the middle was wind blown. Everything in the trees was like really sugary, soft, no bass. So it was like you fly over a drift, and if the drift is soft, where you're landing could just be ice. So you come out of the trees nice and soft, and then as soon as you come out of that tree line where we were riding, because we're riding Alberta last weekend, as soon as you come out of there, it is just like it's just ice. So you come out of the soft and into the hard, and it's just like an anchor in the front. And I was talking to Ben while we were out there, and he had the same thing. So I don't have a really good feeling for it yet. What you can also do is something I've already done to help with your ski pressure is to loosen off your limiter straps entirely. But we're going to have to pursue other venues on this because of what we did was ending up to be pretty aggressive. So I may drop that skid just a little bit more just to help it out a little bit, help it level out just a little bit more, because I can drop the front just a tiny bit, even if it's half an inch or 3/4 of an inch. I can do that, and I might. So here's where we get onto the approach angle that I want to talk about. With doing that modification, dropping the skid, and I think I'm going to drop it even more, the approach angle is going to be much more aggressive than it was before. And to Cat standards, if you look at Cat's approach angle on that series of sled anyway, compared to even this hardcore sitting here, the approach angle on them is a little more aggressive than the new ones. So coming from a 14, the approach angle already being aggressive, I'm going to drop the skid, and certainly I'm going to make it worse. And what is going to be the consequence of that? Well, it's probably going to trench more. I may have to do some shock adjustments to help it sit up on the snow a little better. Another consequence of that could be expedited life of your Hyfax. Hyfax are the slide rail plastics that basically are wear apart, but that sled has 5,000 kilometers on a mountain sled, 5,000 kilometers on the stock Hyfax. So I'm not really concerned about that. It actually also has the anti-stab kit, so it's not going to be jabbing into the rails. Even if I make it a little more aggressive, I think it'll be okay. Long and short of that, it's not going to climb like it did before. I doubt it, but that's not what I was trying to do. So like I said, everything's kind of a kit like this. Everything's kind of a trade-off. So no, it is not going to climb as well as it did before because of that more aggressive approach angle, but it's going to be much more playful after we did what we did. The height, that is one thing that we certainly changed. So compared to the hardcore and the white M8s, and this isn't a good gauge behind me because they're sitting on different height sled dollies. The white M8, the 2014, is sitting much higher than the hardcore. It's actually sitting is high when you're standing on it, when you're on the handlebars. It's sitting at the same height as a Pro RMK, which I like. So this could be a pro or a con depending on what you're doing, what you're trying to get out of it. Is that now that the center of gravity is higher on the sled, at about an inch all around, give or take, now you have a higher center of gravity, right? So that's going to make that machine more tippy and easier to maneuver, but it is higher now. Width is the next thing we changed. We had a 38-inch A-arm kit in there. That was the stock for 2014, and we went down to the 36-inch kit, which was what they came out with in 2016. So because of the geometry in the front, we had a wicked camber issue, if you guys remember, especially on the one side, which, you know, something's probably bent. Because we had that wicked camber issue, we were actually able to bring in the spindle a little bit more, about a 1/4 inch on each side. So now, instead of 36-inch stance, we're actually down to 35.5-inch stands, which is great. That's actually what I want. It's gonna make it easier to bring over on its side. It's gonna make it easier to hold a side hill. That's what I was going for, because I even had the guys talk to me last time we were out in the mountains, and they said, that thing looks hard to ride in this kind of snow. I said, it is, but we haven't added out since then with what we've done to it. So still, there's definitely still more testing that needs to be done before I know exactly what this kit is going to do, the way I have it installed, and how it's going to do it. This is another one related to camber, spindles. So the spindles are actually raked back even a little further than they normally would. I don't know if there is going to be any intended or unintended consequences in doing this yet. I haven't had it out in a lot of good snow. I had it out in that sugary kind of wind-blown stuff that just blows off the mountain and just settles somewhere, and then you just got your sugar snow. So I had it out in that, but I haven't been really able to test it out in good snow. I don't really anticipate there to be any problems there with that, but we have raked them back even a little further than they would be from the factory. In conclusion, I still have a bunch of stuff I'm gonna do to it, but I thought I would address at least the handling issue right off the bat until we do that other stuff, because there was definitely some people, they were getting a little excited. So we'll at least address that, and you kind of know what you're getting into. If you plan on doing this kit, just be aware that there are some things that you're gonna have to contend with. Even though I have not had it out in a lot of good snow yet, a lot of people have been asking me, how do you feel about it? And I said, I'm loving it. I absolutely love how high I'm sitting. Like, I get why people do those Elevate kits, and this is kind of like a Chinese Elevate kit is what we did to this sled, and now Ben is strongly thinking about a Elevate kit for his. We are doing some cool stuff to that tomorrow or the next day too, so stay tuned for that, because there's a bunch of cool stuff coming for that involving this. There was people asking me, why didn't I do it this way? Why didn't I go with a trencher kit? Why didn't I go with a BDX kit? I didn't want to spend a lot of money. I'm just trying to squeeze out the rest of the season and maybe a little bit of next one and actually have it as a spare. So I just didn't want to dump a bunch of money into it, because I know it's going to get replaced at some point. So it's definitely, like, when you say I'm modding an old M8000, well, as far as M8000s go, that's actually the first M8000, believe it or not, because the 2012 was a M800, 2013 was an M800. So as far as old M8000s go, they don't get older than that M8000, even though the M800s were essentially the same thing. I just wanted to build it under a budget, and that's already going really well for me. I hope that answered some of your guys' questions. If you're thinking about doing this kit, answered some of your guys' concerns, because there's certainly a few things that you have to be aware of when you're customizing sleds. Like, I've been doing it for 10 years, so I already kind of know what I'm getting myself into, but sometimes I forget. You guys don't know as much as I do. If you have any questions, there's more to come very soon on that machine. That one first, though, probably. Drop them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as fast as I can. Sometimes I get backlogged and I end up doing all the replies all at once in one day. Thanks everybody for watching. Links for Patreon, the merch store. Ring that bell down below. Subscribe to the channel. I think that's everything. Hit the like button. Go ahead and do that. We'll see you in the next one. I think it's gonna be that one next. I think that's the next video. Thanks everybody for watching. See you in the next video.